Okay, Saturday Night Live just showed up on Netflix. And I'm not talking about the show Saturday Night Live, because you can watch that on Peacock. But I'm talking about the movie Saturday Night, the one that Jason Reitman made. And I didn't get to see this when it was in theaters, but I wanted to see this movie because I like the idea of this, showing what it was like when the first episode of Saturday Night Live aired. This was in 1975. Television was a very different landscape than it is now. If you're not familiar with the overall plot of this film, this is a film that takes place in real time, which I did not expect for this film. But it starts off at, like, say, 10 o'clock at night. And if you know anything about Saturday Night Live, it starts at 11:30 every Saturday night. So it starts off at 10 and goes from, and it shows that hour and a half time right before it started. And there is a lot in this film that I'm going okay, I believe a lot of the events of this film actually happened, but I don't necessarily believe they happened in this compressed manner that they showed them in. Now, I'm willing to watch a movie like this and kind of feel like, okay, I'm willing to believe that, but I don't believe that it happened precisely like that. Now, what I can't tell is when I'm watching this movie, whether or not the writers and director are self-aware of this. That is, are they actually saying to the audience, yeah, we know that you know that it didn't really happen this way, but most of the stuff in here kind of happened like this. And that's fine. I think this is what we do when we tell a movie. We display a fiction. Even though Saturday Night Live is in fact a real show that has been going on for, 50 years. And still relevant culturally today. And best of all, still going pretty strong. I don't watch it, but sometimes I do. But yeah. And of course, it has had to redefine itself and what it has meant over the years. So seeing its initial heyday during that time is a really interesting, it's just a really good premise for a film overall. This could have been a film in which they could have just made stuff up, and they could have made up this film, they could have made up a show kind of like the show 30 Rock does, with The Girly Show or whatever like that, and they could have done this with Liz Lemon or something like that. They could have done it something like that. I'm actually kind of like the fact that it does this, and not only that, they got a lot of group of actors to play the Saturday Night Live cast members, and they do a really great job impersonating them. And that's what I actually think is really kind of the fun thing about watching this, and I actually think that's probably was supposed to be the real hook of the audience. But hey man, generations have gone by, and there are some people who don't even know the original cast members. And hey, my first exposure to Saturday Night Live was watching it in reruns in syndication with these original cast members. And by that time, many of them were already big Hollywood stars, like Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and sadly John Belushi, who I remember in 1982 when the news came out that he had passed away. So, and here's also the thing. I've talked about several times in my videos how I used to write skits for college-age groups, and how that, I'm actually thinking about doing a show about that in February. But the angle of it might be different than what you think. But I do want to emphasize that when I had this role, there was this time that before we did the sketch, there was about a few hours before that where we did a rehearsal and other things like that. And there's a time where it becomes like a super circus, and you're wondering how in the world is this going to all come together? And then it just sort of magically does. And I think it's sort of interesting that the show shows this hour and a half before the show, this iconic show starts, and how it just looked like everything was going wrong. And they show not only accidents that happened on the set, because apparently some lighting fixture did fall down and set a couch on fire. I'm actually told that did happen. Now, whether it happened an hour and a half before the sketch, the show actually premiered, I don't know. I actually looked up a few things on this about this thing and I found there were some things that were in fact factual. Number one is that John Belushi didn't really sign his contract until the very last minute. That's what I'm told. There's a few other things that I think they took creative liberties on, but happened in some manner or another. One instance is a guest appearance by J.K. Simmons, who's in every Jason Reitman movie, I believe. And I feel like he's contractually obligated to be in a Jason Reitman film. And he plays the TV legend Milton Berle. And they actually show a particular scene in which Milton Berle flashes people. And apparently this did happen, but probably not during the premiere episode, at least not during the premiere episode rehearsal. But Milton Berle did host the show, and he was sort of recognized as being like one of their worst hosts, because Milton Berle is a very classically trained kind of comedian who, I mean, for crying out loud, like in the film, he calls himself Mr. Television, because when television was budding, he was a very big star on that. So he had a very specific type of comedy that he was sort of used to, which did not dovetail very well into Saturday Night Live's type of comedy, which I think is sort of like the issue in this film, which is what I liked seeing. And in fact, there's a really good scene where Lorne Michaels is constantly feuding with the studio executives, because the studio executives are constantly breathing down his neck, telling him that they realize the talent here, but they're also telling him, you don't seem to know what this show is, do you? And to me, I'm kind of thinking like, it's strange that it's just a variety sketch show. I mean, but he doesn't really just say that. He goes out of his way to describe sort of the experience and the feelings of the show, which I really think is really the heart of this film, and it's done right before they do the first episode. And I really think it kind of really makes this film work really well. Yeah, there's several times in this film where I was kind of going like, there's one particular scene, for example, where they introduce like a young Billy Crystal. But here's the thing, Lorne Michaels, Billy Crystal demands a certain amount of time for his act, and Lorne can't really give it to him because apparently they stuffed this show with so much that there was no way they could do this all in an hour and a half. So they eventually just had to start like cutting things. And one of the things was cut, I think, was maybe Jim Henson. I actually think that, I don't know if they actually had his sketches on the show, but they go out of their way to show that Jim Henson was there during this premiere Saturday Night Live thing, and was very much prepared to do something, but he didn't have a script ready. Now, I don't know if that part is true, but I know that Jim Henson and Lorne Michaels famously didn't really get along, and that partnership didn't work out well. As for Billy Crystal, I mean, he went on to eventually, like, at some point in time in their, I don't know, say 84, 85, he was on the show, and he was definitely the front runner. If you're not familiar with Saturday Night Live, they usually have one person on the show who starts becoming like the most popular aspect of the show. Like in the early 80s, it was Eddie Murphy, and I'm assuming what we can call John Belushi that from what we see, or what I've seen in reruns, because he did steal the show on several occasions. And yeah. So I will have to recommend this movie, and especially if you like Saturday Night Live, I think it's just fun to see this sort of, I guess, origin story movie, for lack of a better term. I don't really know how to describe it other than that, but I have to admit that, it's a creative sort of historical fiction. Let's call it that. Because I really have a hard time believing that Lorne Michaels, the executive producer of the show, was out in front of NBC's headquarters trying to give out flyers to this show and couldn't get people to come to it. And then just for some reason at the last minute, there were just a lot of people lined up for it. And then there was this weird thing where people are like putting together some bricks, and I couldn't figure out like where the heck that came from, this idea that they were making like a stage or something like that. And then, hey, if from what I remember from when I wrote skits, a lot of things go wrong at the last minute, but it also starts to come together at the last minute. And it's a good movie. See it if you haven't.